Another day of rocket attacks at Kabul airport, but American anti-missile defenses have managed to intercept up to 5 incoming missiles. The attacks come as the United States rushes to complete its withdrawal from Afghanistan. The clock is ticking as US President Joe Biden's deadline looms. Evacuation flights will officially end tomorrow.
Cutting a somber figure, Joe Biden paid his respects to 13 soldiers killed in last week's attack near Kabul airport. Back in Afghanistan, US troops are trying to prevent more carnage as they rush to complete America's withdrawal by the August 31st deadline. But tensions are on the rise. Anti-missile defense systems have intercepted as many as 5 rockets that were fired at Kabul airport. It's believed the rockets were launched from the back of a vehicle. This follows a weekend of US drone strikes targeting members of ISIS-K.
وضعیت خب مردم وحشت زده و ترسیده و همگی در فکر عزیز که آینده افغانستان و باز این راکت پراگنده‌های دههای قبلی باز تکرار میشه و به این خاطر مردم هم کم ترسیده و وحشت زده هستند ولی به هر حالش میگذره.
مادر در مداخل خانه اولادا کلگی بوده که من فامیلم بسته یک دفعه یک ناچار بینیم گرم یعنی میجه شد ما کل مادروی اولی خود انداختیم و میجه خاک و خاک پر.
About 4,000 US troops remain at Kabul's airport as the final flights head out. Washington says it has evacuated more than 114,000 people in the last 2 weeks. But tens of thousands of Afghans who want to flee will be left behind. The Taliban have struggled to re-establish basic services since they swept into Kabul. Doctors Without Borders has warned the healthcare system is at risk of collapse. Many desperate for food have been seen frantically reaching for bags of bread being handed out by non-profit groups. The Taliban says it will announce a full cabinet in the coming days and that difficulties will subside quickly once a new administration is in place. But the UN has warned of a major humanitarian disaster.
Nick Harper joins us from Washington, D.C. for more. Nick, will the rising tensions affect the final evacuations out of Afghanistan?
Well, Steve, it's certainly a very precarious situation at the airport. It was something that the US warned would happen. They always said that this final phase would be the most dangerous. We obviously saw the huge suicide bombing on Thursday, these rocket attacks that the US countered over the course of the last 24 hours. And on top of that, as we heard in that report just there are tens of thousands of people who probably won't get out the country in the next 24 hours before the US troops withdraw. So there's this real scramble to get people onto planes. But despite these rising tensions, despite the rocket attacks, the US says it is continuing its operations right up until the last moment. Over the weekend, we saw a number of other Western countries wind down their evacuation from Kabul airport. Canada and the UK, they both finished their evacuation flights. The US says that even though with these threats, even with the potential of more terrorist attacks, they will be there right up until the last moment trying to get people onto planes.
And Nick, talk to us about the sort of escalation of what we've seen then. Have the US retaliatory strikes complicated the relationship with the Taliban?
Well, Steve, that relationship, of course, was already very complicated, but it seems to have made things worse. We have had the Taliban spokesman on Chinese state television saying that he has condemned that drone strike from the US over the weekend, the one that the US said took out a bomb cache that was in a vehicle that was heading towards Kabul airport. He called it an arbitrary strike. He also said that it was unlawful. And he said that around 7 civilians were killed in that attack. Now, that's something that the United States says that they are looking into. Initially, they said that they were firing at ISIS-K members, that no civilians were involved, but very distressing that there are reports that perhaps an entire family may have been killed in that attack. But the US is saying that it will continue its counter-terrorism operations even after it withdraws troops, because the one thing it doesn't want to happen, and it made this agreement with the Taliban, that Afghanistan does not once again become a safe haven for terrorists, as it did at the end of the 1990s, heading up to the 9/11 attack back in 2001 when al-Qaeda terrorists were allowed to really roam free in Afghanistan under Taliban rule. So the US wants to make sure that doesn't happen. They're threatening more strikes. But of course, here we have the Taliban already saying that any strikes are unlawful and saying that they do not want the US to be carrying out such attacks without consultation with them first.
Thanks for getting us up to speed. Nick Harper in Washington, D.C.